It's March the 29th, Friday, and it's the deadline for Brexit. However, we still haven't seen a clear path out for the UK to leave the European Union. There's still quite a distance from now to the end of the process that has been going on for more than 2 years. On Friday, part of Prime Minister Theresa May's deal will be once again put on the table for voting. So will a silver lining appear in the last day, and how will the deadlock on Brexit be broken? Will the British people have the result they demanded in 2016? To look at the future of Brexit, I'm joined in our Beijing studio by Mr. Cui Hongjian, Director of the Department for European Studies at China Institute of International Studies, and Mr. William Spears, Chairman of Spearhead China Limited. And via satellite, we shall speak to Mr. Fraser Cameron, Director of the EU Asia Centre in Brussels, and Mr. Alexander Mercouris, who's in London. He's the Editor-in-Chief of the Duran via telephone. That's our topic. This is Dialogue. I'm Pando. So, gentlemen, let's talk about the future of Brexit. Let me start with you, Mr. Spears. Do you think anything decisive will happen on March the 29th, or are you already looking at April the 12th?
Well, the Prime Minister May has said 100 times that we will Brexit on March the 29th. That's pretty clear it's not going to happen today. Hopefully they will come to some conclusion today, but I'm really concerned that there will not be consensus of opinion in Parliament because of the diverse interests I've mentioned, and the RSS, IDP, DUP, they have very concerned about the border control, understandably, and if the Conservatives Prime Minister does not get their support, it won't go through.
So, are you looking at a no-deal scenario in the near future, having said that?
It looks like a no-deal scenario to me at the moment.
What's your take on this, Mr. Chair?
Yes, I think this vote, on the 29th of March, mostly it's a symbolic event happened, especially to show still, Prime Minister May and her government is trying to get some effort to have this so-called orderly Brexit. But of course, we can also find out some pragmatic sense for this vote, which means still the Prime Minister is still trying to get some majority from Parliament, because we can find out this vote is different from so-called the third vote after the last two defeats by the government. It shows that, yes, we can have the issue-by-issue vote, and still, I think that the Prime Minister wants to get some clear message from Parliament. What's the priority, and what should get some more compromise from the European Union side through the negotiation and so on. But of course, I think that, yes, the 29th of March is important, but because
it was the original
deadline, yes.
Now it's already gone.
Yes, but I think that no matter which kind of effort now Prime Minister May and her government did, but yes, I think that the no-deal Brexit scenarios, the possibility is keeping increasing and increasing.
And Mr. Spears, do you think Theresa May's effort has already failed?
Theresa May was in a very difficult position when she became leader of the Conservative Party and therefore Prime Minister. She has had to compromise, because really she's a Remainer. She's not a Brexiteer, and she's endeavouring to take the will of the democratic people to come out of Europe, if you wish. But the will is not really there, in my opinion. And also the big problem was she never consulted with her cabinet as she should have done. Didn't involve them in the discussions. It was rather a fait accompli when everything was agreed. And of course, the cabinet were a bit naughty as well, because they actually agreed to it. And the following day, I think three of them, Boris Johnson and David Davis and someone else, they resigned. They should have resigned on that day at Chequers and said, no, we do not agree with this.
Right, now let's get more response from the EU side, and let's talk to Mr. Fraser Cameron in Brussels. Mr. Cameron, earlier our studio guest, Mr. Cui Hongjian, said that March the 29th vote and Parliament will be a symbolic one. How does the EU feel about it?
Well, it is symbolic because the EU said that the withdrawal agreement has two parts: the withdrawal agreement, which they're voting on today, and also the future declaration on relations with the EU. They go as a package, and they will both have to be agreed for the EU to give its consent. Now, deadlines are flexible. The history of the EU shows that almost no deadline has been met for anything. So April the 12th looms, but it can be postponed again because Parliament has voted by a huge margin against a no deal. So I think if it comes next week and no progress is made, that could change again, and the EU would be flexible again. Although, I must say, there is growing impatience in Brussels with the whole Brexit fiasco in London.
So talking about that impatience, what could be the consequence of that kind of growing impatience? Are you looking at a no-deal, hard Brexit too?
Nobody wants a no deal because the consequences would be catastrophic for everybody. I mean, particularly the UK, but the EU would also be hit. So they want a managed Brexit. But patience is running out in terms of how long can this go on, because it's disrupting the life and the institutions of the EU, and they want closure on it. So there are a growing number of people here who are saying, well, if it's a no deal, so be it. We will survive, and we have to deal with other priorities. So that's the danger, that this mood that there's going to be an impasse is growing, and people will simply have to accept it.
So what about the political dynamics? If Theresa May resigns, does the EU have any clear picture who they will be dealing with in the next saga to come?
Nobody has any clear picture of who the next Prime Minister will be. I mean, the one they do not want is Boris Johnson because of what he's been saying about the EU. Having said that, Johnson's whole history shows that he can be very flexible in how he can change his opinion. He's changed his mind about 3 times this week alone. So in that sense, he could be a very flexible operator in terms of taking on the next stage of negotiations between the UK and the EU. But nobody knows who the next leader will be, and nobody's obviously going to put any public statement out because that would be the kiss of death.
Let's talk a little bit more about being flexible. You said the EU can extend the deadline, maybe time and time again, but will there be a set date saying that the EU will say enough is enough, we have to reach some conclusion to this endless drama?
Well, it depends a little bit on what happens in the UK. If Parliament were to, for some reason, go for either an election or a referendum, that would be a game changer, and the EU would be prepared to wait and see the outcome. But if the impasse, if the blockage continues next week, then that will, I think, increase the number of voices here who say, well, look, they simply are unable to reach a deal. We just have to cut our losses and get on with it.
Well, Mr. Fraser Cameron in Brussels. So, Mr. Tsui, let's talk more about EU's upcoming stance. Do you think it's prepared for a no-deal scenario too?
Yes, to some degree. I think the European Union is trying to prepare something, especially for the no-deal Brexit. Even maybe, according to Fraser's observation, not so big a possibility for this situation. But I think that now the question is, for example, once this after this vote in the British Parliament, if the Prime Minister could take a priority from these votes, and maybe she will try to give a new package for this draft deal, and then once it going into the negotiation with the European Union again, yes, we can find out hope of a survival of this orderly Brexit, maybe before May, because as we know there are 2 deadlines according to the European Union. But of course, I think now the ball is in the court of UK. So European Union, to some degree, it will try to observe the situation in Parliament firstly, and then how about this possible change of the British leaders. So also we know, but now the question is, I don't think any potential candidate for this new prime minister will be lucky, because no matter which person, including Johnson or somebody else, once they take the position of prime minister, they have to face the same situation. So I don't think the personal or personality or maybe a kind of attraction of leadership will resolve this deadlock.
So are you saying that a hard Brexit, the scenario, will hurt EU less than it does to the UK?
Yes, of course, because we can understand that European Union always takes the advantage in the negotiation. And even for this no-deal situation, certainly the UK will suffer much more than the European Union. So I think that's also a reason why European Union should be more patient for any kind of a situation. But for UK, as we know now, not only the Brexit process itself, and also it involved into deeply this political struggles among the parties and even within the Conservative Party.
Do you agree, Mr. Spears? It will hurt your country more.
Well, Great Britain has always been very resilient, so I must disagree with you just a little. It will hurt us, of course it will, and it will hurt Europe, because there's always going to be an imbalance for a time with uncertainty. No one likes uncertainty. Companies don't like uncertainty. We need to get on with surviving, with trading, not only with Europe, but the rest of the world. So in reality, Europe will lose $39 billion, or £39 billion. UK will be a little better off and be happy, but at the end of the day, there's all this mismatch of expectation between Europe and Great Britain. And of course, we have the Northern Ireland situation we must be very careful with. If we have a hard border there, we may resurrect the Troubles. We call it the Troubles when we have the problems between Northern and Southern Ireland, which we do not want under any circumstance. But therefore, we've been through it before. We may have to go through it again. And we will survive. Maybe not as great as we used to, but we will come through it again, definitely.
So let's talk a little bit more about the Irish backstop. Do you think there will be hard borders between Northern Ireland and the island of Ireland?
I certainly hope not. That would be disaster. We have lived together in peace now for 30 years, I think it is, or thereabouts. And certainly in the future, we want to continue living together, because the trade, Europe and, well, rather Great Britain and Ireland, there's a lot of trade between us, fantastic amount of trade. And we still want to have that trade both ways. In actual fact, most of Irish exports go to the UK. So we want that to continue. It's just crazy that we have this crazy situation with this Irish border. It shouldn't have been negotiated, shouldn't have been put in there. It was a very clever ploy on Europe's part. It's very silly of Theresa May to say there will not be a no deal, because that destroyed her actual negotiating tactic. So we will survive, definitely, but it's not going to be easy.
So do you think the whole hard border issue is an actual challenge to the UK's sovereignty, as some Conservative politicians have been saying?
Definitely, because it will create the same problem again, because Northern Ireland wanted to stay in Europe. London wanted to stay in Europe. Scotland wanted to stay in Europe. Yeah, but overall in the country it's 52%, 48%. Being a democracy, we have to follow, you know, the winner, if you wish, or the winning poll. It's going to be difficult. I'm saying what may happen one day, Northern Ireland and Ireland may come together, but which a lot of people want. But on the other hand, there are a lot of people in Northern Ireland who want to be part of the UK. So it's going to be a big issue for a long time.
So, Mr. Tree, is there any precedent in continental history or British history that this kind of border issue can be well dealt with?
As we know, in the European integration, I think one of its very big function is to deal with this traditional border issue or some complex issue. So I think that's also a reason why at this moment, the hard border issue between Northern Ireland and Ireland become a very, very big problem during the negotiation process. But of course, I think so far, if the both two sides, I mean EU and the UK, they try to deal with it. I think firstly, maybe it could be selected from this we call it sovereignty or some other issue. But of course, I think it depends on which kind of Brexit you will choose. For example, there will be a softer Brexit, which means yes, we can find more, solutions for the hard border issue. But of course, if you insist this hard Brexit, it will become a very, very serious issue, especially in the emotional feeling for the average people and for the politicians in UK. So I think now perhaps once it happened, during the negotiation, if Prime Minister May not set this North Ireland issue into the negotiation, for example, just like what happened between UK and Spain to deal with the Gibraltar issue, to become it as a bilateral issue, I think it will be easy for this situation at the moment. So I don't know. But now the question is, European Union side will not get back. It will insist that, okay, now North Ireland issue and the hard border issue already in the package. So I think that's a reason why they have a deadlock now.
Well, gentlemen, we'll be continuing this discussion right after this. You're watching Dialogue on CGTN. Stay with us. So, gentlemen, let's trace back a little bit, get back to the origin of the current big problem. Mr. Spears, you just mentioned that the result of the 2016 Brexit referendum was 52 versus 48. It's almost half. Do you think this is, it's questionable in the context of a sound democratic system?
Good question. If we have another referendum, it could be the other way around, 52 to stay in and 48 to go out. So we've still got the same problem, in as much there's going to be a polarity of feeling, a polarity of opinion. And it's crazy, because we want to live in a very peaceful community. If Europe, see, the big problem is many people don't like being told what to do by unelected people, especially in the democratic system of Europe. And that's what the big problem is, really. Some people don't worry. If everyone voted, it would be fairer, but people don't vote. I personally gave my vote as a proxy to someone else. I couldn't be in the country at the time. Now, I hope he voted whatever he wanted to vote, but who knows what he voted.
Since it's almost half-half, many people are talking about the possibility of the second referendum. And for more, let's talk to Mr. Fraser Cameron in Brussels. Mr. Cameron, is the EU and you are expecting a second referendum? Is that possible at all?
Well, of course it's possible. In a democracy, people can change their mind. They change their mind, regularly at elections. And if you just saw in the last week or so, many Brexiteers changed their mind about the withdrawal agreement. So it's a fundamental tenet of democracy that you can change your mind. Referendums are inherently a silly way to proceed when your whole history is about representative democracy. That's why, Britain is a parliamentary democracy. It has a parliamentary system to take these decisions. Very rarely has there been a referendum. And the whole history of referendum shows that it's almost never just about the question on the ballot paper. It's often about the economic performance of the government of the day, or they might be involved in some local issue. They want to make a protest vote. So it's really a silly way to make decisions. So I think there's a very good democratic case, whenever you get a deal, to put it back to the people and say, look, you've seen now, after 3 years, what the issues are relating to Brexit. Do you still want to go ahead with this deal, or do you want to change your mind and stay in the EU? Up to you.
And Mr. Cameron, talking about that, are you saying that, talking about the origin of the whole problem right now, are you saying that some politicians have failed their people?
Completely. It's quite obvious if you look at the situation in the British Parliament today. They have simply stayed within tribal boundaries, their party limits. I think Theresa May, when she took over as Prime Minister, should have reached out to all parties. Instead, she very quickly imposed her red line, saying we're not staying in the single market, we're not staying in the customs union. And once you do that, your options are very limited. And she was originally a Remainer, so she wanted to try and preserve as many of the advantages as possible. But quite simply, you know, you cannot have your cake and eat it. You have actually got to make choices. And once you decide to leave the customs union, leave the single market, you're simply not going to get the same deal as the existing members of the European Union. And this is why the Brits completely failed to understand the solidarity that the other 27 extended to Ireland. Ireland was staying in the EU. Ireland was a member. Britain was leaving. Britain was no longer going to be a member. And that completely changed the balance in terms of the negotiating power between Brussels and London. And London simply didn't understand that.
So, Mr. Cameron, from your observation, do you think the result of the 2016 referendum is the true voice of the people? Because looking at the two campaigns, they both utilized companies like Cambridge Analytica and Aggregate IQ. Digital data mining, it looks like opinion was shaped rather than expressed by people themselves.
Yes, I mean, there's now evidence of considerable fake news, of Russian money involved. There's a police investigation going on into the Leave campaign. There's criminal offences being committed. That's absolutely, you know, black and white. So I think, you know, the reason now for a second referendum is to say, look, this was not carried out fairly last time round. You've now seen what the options are. We've had a very big debate about the EU inside the UK, so people are better informed now. And opinion is still divided, but all the recent polls show that there's now between 55 and 60% of people wishing to vote Remain, and many people have changed their minds. And obviously, in a democracy, people should be allowed to change their mind.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fraser Cameron, Director of the EU Asia Centre in Brussels. And now let's get more momentum from London, and let's talk to Mr. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran. Thank you very much for joining us, Mr. Mercouris. So earlier we were talking about the possibility of a second referendum, and we know that several days ago there was quite a big turnout of protests or people's expression of their demand for a second referendum in London. What's the real sentiment there? Is this the mainstream British public opinion right now?
I think that one can't speak clearly about a mainstream public opinion on the referendum issue, because on the whole question of Brexit, the country is extremely divided. And while it is true that opinion polls at the moment suggest that the Remain side, the side that would prefer to stay in the EU, has now pulled ahead to a certain extent in opinion polls, it is always important to remember that a large majority of people in England, outside London, voted to leave. England is the core territory of the United Kingdom. It returns around 2/3 of the seats to the House of Commons, which have MPs, and it is the fact that most politicians in the House of Commons see this fact and realise that without the support of England, it would be very difficult to form a government in London, that I think is deterring the leaderships of the two major parties, the Conservative Party and the Labour Party, from moving forward with this second referendum idea. The Labour Party leadership, which is crucial in this area, has talked about a second referendum, but it is consistently put off supporting one for the reason I have said. I think they fear that they would not win a general election if they supported it.
So now, the next big day is April the 12th. What will happen from your observation after that date? A snap election, the resignation of Theresa May, and a new Prime Minister, maybe?
I think that it is highly likely that we're going to see the resignation of Theresa May. at some point over the next few days. The general prediction at the moment is that Theresa May will lose her vote later today. I think it's difficult to see her remaining Prime Minister if that happens. The difficulty is that there is no consensus within the Conservative Party or the Conservative government as to who should take over. That person is most unlikely to be Theresa May, Boris Johnson, incidentally, because he is not a member of the British cabinet. It would have to be a stopgap figure. That person, whoever he or she is, would undoubtedly need to contact the EU and ask for a further extension. And I think in that kind of situation, where there was uncertainty about who the new government is, who the new Prime Minister would be, because it would be a temporary person taking over, there would probably be a general election at some point. So it's a very complicated scenario. Nothing is clear because we don't have very much clarity, and procedures for electing the leader of the Conservative Party are very complicated. So in this situation, it's not easy to say with certainty what would happen, but I predict that the British will ask the EU for an extension beyond the 12th of April. They won't probably have a plan to put to the EU, and I think that points to a general election as the only way to break the impasse in Westminster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alexander Mercouris in London. Now, Mr. Cui, Brexit will happen one way or the other. After that, let's look beyond specific time points. After that, how difficult, how challenging will be the UK to deal with its diplomacy and economic ties with continental Europe?
I think if we look at this Brexit procedure, even, yes, we can find out some more problems or challenges towards the British political system and its legal procedure, and how could it keep a balance between so-called direct democracy reflected in the referendum, and also how about the parliament democracy. It's just happened right now. It's a very, very drastic gaming between parties, between the members of parliament. And then how about the power of the government? So if we look at the whole procedure of the Brexit from a referendum till now, we can find that yes, it will be a very, very big challenge to this very traditional, as we know, democratic system in UK. But so far, I don't think already they find a solution, because how could they find out the links between this direct democracy? Because as we know, referendum give an answer to the issue that if we stay or leave from European Union. But the people, they could not take the power to make the decision and to implement their willing, reflected from referendum.
And they have to bear the consequences.
Yes, so that's also the reason why there are a lot of the discussing about the second referendum. But once there will be a second referendum, another question, or maybe a similar question come back, is the rights of people and the rights of member of parliament and the power of government. How could you find out a solution and to avoid any kind of potential gaming between them?
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your input, and that's it for this edition of Dialogue on CGTN. I'm Pan Deng in Beijing. Bye-bye.